They thought it would be the easiest conquest in the history of their empire, until the storm winds and a family dinner changed everything. As Zorathak prepared to issue the attack order at the Great Battle Line, the final notes on Class 15 Deathworld had been misplaced. This world wasn't simply a death environment, but home to inhabitants who made any conquest ambitions meaningless. In the year 4523 SL, Standard Light Year, the Zorathak Empire stood as a formidable cosmic alliance, having conquered 47 planets through superior intellect and cutting-edge technology. Their headquarters, positioned at the Tihei-9 space station, was embraced by the Orion Galaxy Belt, a sprawling metropolis of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields that served as a testament to their dominance across 3 quadrants. Commander Vexorius Thorin strode across the holographic display room, his 6 limbs moving in perfect synchronization as he gestured toward the blue-green sphere rotating in the projection field. Behind him, 12 senior officers of varying species gazed at the hologram with analytical precision. "Esteemed colleagues," Vexorius began, his voice carrying the unmistakable resonance of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I present to you our next acquisition, Earth." The reputation that preceded Vexorius was impressive, even by Zorathak standards. Known throughout the Empire as the Great Mind, he had outmaneuvered 7 strategic leaders during the astronomical war games by employing predictive analytics that bordered on prescience. His confidence wasn't merely a personality trait, it was a calculated weapon. "This small, water-rich planet presents the perfect opportunity to expand our resource reserves," he continued, manipulating the hologram to highlight the planet's oceans. "Preliminary scans indicate primitive technology, fractured governance systems, and minimal spacefaring capabilities." Vice Admiral Klakina, a 12-eyed strategic analyst whose ocular arrangement allowed her to process 12 different data streams simultaneously, raised one of her upper appendages. "Commander, there appears to be a discrepancy in the xenobiological assessment. The file references Earth as a Class 15 Deathworld. Surely this must be a typographical error." Vexorius dismissed her concern with a casual wave of his tertiary limb. "Obviously, their atmosphere is nitrogen-oxygen-based. Gravity is within tolerable parameters, and their largest predators barely reach the size of a standard cargo pod. It's clearly a Class 1 garden world with a clerical error in the documentation." He moved toward the central console, his exoskeleton gleaming under the ambient light. "I've personally reviewed all strategic assessments. Earth represents a minimal-risk, high-reward opportunity. Their planetary defense systems are directed primarily at each other, which indicates internal strife we can easily exploit." Quibbleton, the technical specialist whose translucent cranial cavity revealed constantly shifting neural patterns, hesitantly interjected, "Sir, preliminary atmospheric composition reports show oxygen levels at 21%. That's extraordinarily flammable by Empire standards. And their nuclear arsenal, while primitive, contains enough yield to—" "Enough," Vexorius interrupted, his voice hardening. "These concerns are precisely why I've streamlined the preliminary assessment process. We've conquered worlds with far more challenging conditions. Prepare the inevitable triumph for departure within 2 lunar cycles." As the Strategic Council disbanded, Vice Admiral Klakina lingered, her multiple eyes focusing on different aspects of the Earth hologram simultaneously. "Commander, with all due respect, I strongly recommend we complete a thorough review of the biological assessment reports. My visual analysis suggests there may be more to this planet than appears on the surface." Vexorius turned to her, his posture radiating confidence bordering on arrogance. "Your concerns are noted, Vice Admiral. But I've made my decision. Earth will be our 48th conquest, and quite possibly our easiest." As the strategic room emptied, the hologram continued to rotate, its blue oceans and swirling white cloud formations creating patterns that had anyone been paying closer attention, resembled something ominously similar to hurricane formations. The inevitable triumph, flagship of the Zorathak conquest fleet, sliced through hyperspace with the confidence of a predator, certain of its prey. On the command bridge, Vexorius watched the swirling vortex of interdimensional transit through the main viewport, hands clasped behind his back in a posture of absolute certainty. "Status report," he commanded, not bothering to look at the bridge crew. Subcommander Grizzlethorpe, a nervous hybrid of jellyfish and filing cabinet, whose tentacles constantly organized and reorganized data tablets, hurried forward. "Hyperdrive functioning at 98.2% efficiency. Commander, we will reach Earth orbit in approximately 47 minutes. "Excellent. And the battle simulations?" "All projections indicate total planetary subjugation within 3.2 standard days," Grizzlethorpe replied, a tentacle nervously twitching. "Though technical specialist Quibbleton has requested permission to present additional findings regarding the target planet's environmental conditions." Vexorius sighed, a sound like air escaping a pressure valve. "Very well. Where is he?" Quibbleton emerged from the data analysis section, his neural patterns visibly agitated. "Commander, I've managed to analyze approximately 300 pages of the Earth biological assessment." "Out of how many?" Vexorius interrupted. "Approximately 14,000 pages, sir," Quibbleton admitted, his voice modulating nervously. "The Administrative Oversight Committee kept flagging portions for typographical verification and removing them from the database." "And what earth-shattering revelations have you discovered in those 300 pages?" Vexorius asked, sarcasm dripping from each syllable. Quibbleton's neural patterns briefly froze before resuming at double speed. "Sir, the planet has experienced at least 5 mass extinction events and continues to harbor life forms that survived each cataclysm. The dominant species engages in recreational activities specifically designed to risk termination. They have weapons pointed at themselves capable of rendering entire continents uninhabitable. They voluntarily consume substances that cause pain and discomfort for enjoyment." Vexorius stared at him for a long moment before breaking into laughter. "So they're reckless and prone to self-destruction. That makes our job easier, not harder. Anything else?" "Just one thing, sir." Quibbleton hesitated. "Before we left the station, Vice Admiral Klockina submitted an urgent request to review the Class 15 Deathworld designation. She insists it's not a typographical error." Vexorius turned back to the viewport, watching the hyperspatial vortex churn. "We only need the preliminary assessment, enough to know they're a risk-disregarding species. The conquest will proceed as planned." As the words left his mouth, the swirling energy patterns outside the ship briefly formed what looked eerily like weather system projections. Dozens of spiraling vortices spreading across a blue background. None of the bridge crew recognized these as hurricane formation patterns. Nor did they notice when the shipboard environmental systems momentarily flashed data about something called hurricane season on Earth. The inevitable triumph emerged from hyperspace directly above the Atlantic Ocean, exactly as planned. What wasn't planned, however, was the massive hurricane Lolly that greeted them with winds exceeding 150 miles per hour and waves that reached heights capable of dwarfing small buildings. "What in the 7 moons of Zilthor is that?" Vexorius demanded, staring at the massive storm system dominating the viewscreen. Chief Meteorological Officer Typhoon, whose name was considered amusingly coincidental at that moment, frantically analyzed the swirling weather pattern. "It appears to be a naturally occurring atmospheric disturbance, Commander. Extremely powerful, with electrical discharges and precipitation levels that exceed safety parameters for our external sensors. Surely our ships can withstand a bit of wind and water." Vexorius scoffed, though his confident posture had stiffened slightly. "Proceed with the approach vector." The command was barely executed when the first hailstones, each the size of a fist, began bombarding the hull. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as a plasma conduit ruptured from the impact. "Atmospheric abrasion exceeding tolerance levels," Quibbleton shouted over the sudden blare of alarms. "The saltwater environment is corroding our nanomagnolium hull plating at an accelerated rate." "Impossible," Vexorius muttered, though the evidence was literally flashing before his eyes. "Our alloys are impervious to primitive environmental conditions." Sir," Grizzlethorpe ventured timidly. "Preliminary scans show multiple small vessels still operating within this storm. The native life forms appear to be voluntarily navigating these conditions." "Preposterous!" Vexorius snapped, but moved to the view screen to see for himself. Indeed, 3 small fishing boats were visible through the driving rain, their lights blinking defiantly against the darkness of the storm. The tiny village of Porto das Tempestades, along the Brazilian coast, twinkled with its own constellation of lights, somehow maintaining electricity despite nature's fury. Semi-aquatic life forms, perhaps," Sub-Commander Grizzlethorpe suggested, visibly nauseated at the thought. "They live in a high-pressure environment, constantly enduring annual storms." Vexorius narrowed his eyes, challenge rising in his voice. "Let them drown then, and we'll respond in kind." He ordered the fleet to descend, but the 3 fishing vessels stubbornly persisted, each a small point of light, emitting radio signals that sounded distinctly friendly. "Oi, are you folks okay up there? This storm's a big one. Need any help?" The warm, slightly accented voice crackled through the Zorathak communication system, leaving the entire bridge crew momentarily speechless. Until this moment, none of them had considered the possibility that the locals might proactively offer assistance to what they presumably saw as a vessel in distress. Vexorius stared at the communication panel as if it had suddenly transformed into an unknown life form. "They're offering us help? Do they not realize we're an interstellar conquest fleet?" Chief Communications Officer Verbaltrix adjusted her audio receptors. "It appears they may be misinterpreting our presence. Commander, their technology wouldn't allow them to identify us accurately through this weather." After several moments of stunned silence, Vexorius cleared his throat. "Open a channel." When connected, he spoke with all the imperial authority he could muster. "This is Commander Vexorius Thoran of the Zorathak Empire. We have come to—" "Can barely hear you through this storm, friend," the voice interrupted cheerfully. "Look, we're heading back to shore. Follow our lights if you need safe harbor. Nobody should be out in Hurricane Lolly. She's a real monster this year." Before Vexorius could respond, a figure became visible on the nearest fishing boat. Captain Meriticcio Santos stood at the helm, his bright yellow raincoat practically glowing against the dark storm. Despite the torrential downpour, his smile was radiant, cutting through the gloom like a spotlight. "Everyone in your submarine staying dry? Come in for coffee before you catch your death," he called out, apparently believing the massive starship was some kind of underwater vessel. As the Zorathak commanders struggled to process this bizarre turn of events, their ships were being battered mercilessly by the storm. 3 auxiliary vessels reported critical hull integrity failures, and the Inevitable Triumph's navigational system was showing increasing error margins due to electrical interference from lightning strikes. We need to land," Vexorius finally admitted, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "Follow those fishing vessels to their port. We'll regroup and proceed with conquest operations once this atmospheric anomaly subsides." The landing itself was hardly dignified. 2 scout ships crashed into the harbor, their anti-gravity systems short-circuited by seawater infiltration. The Inevitable Triumph managed a more controlled descent, though its imposing silhouette was somewhat diminished by the sparks shooting from multiple damaged systems. As the command shuttle touched down on the small fishing dock, Captain Santos was already waiting, an oversized umbrella in one hand and a thermos in the other. Behind him stood an elderly woman, barely 5 feet tall, wearing an apron and wielding a wooden spoon nearly half her height. Her stern expression suggested she had weathered far worse than mere hurricanes in her 70-some years. "Welcome to Porto das Tempestades," Santos called out cheerfully, as the shuttle door opened. "You picked quite a night to visit. I'm Maurizio, and this is Grandma Beatrice. She's got fish stew, hot and ready." Vexorius emerged from the shuttle, his 6 limbs positioned in what the Zorathak Empire recognized as the formal stance of conquest. Water immediately began soaking his exoskeleton, causing several biomechanical interfaces to short-circuit with small, undignified pops. "We have come to invade," he announced, trying to maintain his dignity, despite the rain plastering his sensory antennae to his cranial carapace. Santos laughed heartily, the sound somehow carrying over the howling wind. "Invade? Oh, you must mean you're filming a science fiction movie. This storm gives you free special effects. Come in and take shelter before you catch pneumonia." Vexorius stood frozen, his expression cycling between confidence and bewilderment. The senior officers exchanged glances, suddenly realizing that their standard conquest protocols had been effectively neutralized from the moment they were offered hot coffee in the middle of a supercell thunderstorm. "We are not filming entertainment media," Vexorius insisted, raising his voice over a particularly violent thunderclap. "We are the Zorathak Empire, conquerors of 47 worlds, and we demand your immediate surrender." Grandma Beatrice stepped forward, eyeing Vexorius with the practiced skepticism of someone who had raised multiple generations of unruly children. "You're very tall, aren't you? And wearing that sparkly costume into my house with wet shoes? Take them off first," she gestured imperiously with her wooden spoon. Before Vexorius could respond to this unprecedented diplomatic approach, Santos intervened. "Let's get you all inside before this gets worse. The forecast says we haven't even hit the eye wall yet." As if to emphasize his point, a bolt of lightning struck the water mere yards from the dock, sending electrical currents dancing across the surface. 3 junior Zorathak officers immediately retreated back into the shuttle. "Fine," Vexorius conceded, more to the storm than to his hosts. "We will accept temporary shelter while we recalibrate our approach." Grandma Beatrice's small home somehow accommodated the Zorathak delegation, though the sight of elite conquest officers crammed onto floral-patterned sofas beneath family photographs would have shocked the Imperial High Command. The walls vibrated with each thunderclap, but the structure stood firm, clearly built to withstand far worse than Hurricane Lolly. "First time in Brazil?" Santos asked cheerfully, distributing mugs of coffee that smelled strong enough to dissolve metal. "You picked quite a season to visit. Hurricane season is just getting started." "Hurricane season?" Sub-Commander Grizzlethorpe repeated weakly. "You mean these atmospheric disturbances occur regularly?" "Oh yes, every year," Santos confirmed, seemingly unconcerned. "This coast gets about 5 major ones annually. Lolly is just the first dance of the season." While this conversation unfolded, Grandma Beatrice was busy in the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans punctuated by occasional muttering in Portuguese. The aromas wafting through the small house were complex and unfamiliar, causing several Zorathak sensory analysts to discreetly activate their toxin detection protocols. When Beatrice emerged with a massive pot of fish stew, technical specialist Quibbleton's neural patterns briefly flatlined before resuming at a frantic pace. His whispered analysis to the commander was dire. The spice compounds in that organic sustenance would terminate approximately 75% of Zorathak species if we were biological entities. Vexorius, however, was trapped by imperial pride. When Beatrice placed a steaming bowl before him and fixed him with an expectant stare, he realized that refusing would constitute a diplomatic incident, albeit a bizarre one in the context of a planned conquest. "Try the stew," she commanded, her tone brooking no argument. "I caught those fish myself this morning before the storm hit." "Santos, meanwhile, was pouring small glasses of a clear liquid. This we call cachaça, firewater. After drinking it, you'll feel truly alive. This world can kill you with mosquitoes, snakes, or even your fellow humans. But the thirst for life, that's more frightening. Under the unwavering gaze of Grandma Beatrice, Vexorius reluctantly lifted a spoonful of the fish stew to his oral intake valve. The moment the liquid touched his sensory receptors, his entire exoskeleton vibrated at a frequency typically associated with extreme danger. The cascade of spices activated warning systems throughout his body, creating a neural experience that the Zorathak had no evolutionary framework to process. "It's flavorful," he managed, as internal alarms shrieked across his neural network. "Good boy," Beatrice nodded approvingly. "Now try the cachaça." The liquid Santos offered proved even more catastrophic to Zorathak's sensory systems. The high alcohol content immediately triggered emergency protocols in Vexorius's biological components, while the fermented sugarcane introduced compounds that no Zorathak filtration system was designed to process. As the command crew struggled to maintain composure in the face of this culinary assault, Santos casually pulled up video footage on a small tablet. "Since you're making a space invasion movie, you might want to see some of our extreme sports for inspiration. Very dramatic stuff." The footage displayed humans voluntarily jumping from great heights with elastic cords attached to their ankles, diving from cliffs with wing-like suits, and riding enormous ocean waves on tiny boards. With each new image, the Zorathak officer's discomfort visibly increased. "They do this for recreation?" Chief Strategic Officer Blurpington asked, his purple, fungoid complexion paling considerably. "Of course," Santos laughed. "Life without a little risk is hardly worth living, eh?" Vexorius was staring at the tablet with something approaching existential horror. "Your species deliberately places itself in lethal situations for entertainment. That's nothing," Santos waved dismissively. "Wait until you see the eating competitions or our hottest chili pepper challenges. People train for years just to endure that kind of pain." Throughout this exchange, the storm outside intensified. Windows rattled in their frames, and the lights flickered ominously. None of the humans seemed particularly concerned, even as a particularly violent thunderclap shook dust from the ceiling. "Perhaps we should review our strategic approach," Vexorius murmured to his officers, as Grandma Beatrice refilled his bowl with more fish stew. "These creatures appear to have an unusual relationship with personal safety." Before any strategic recalibration could occur, however, disaster struck. A massive lightning bolt hit the power grid directly, creating a surge that raced through the local electrical system. The inevitable triumph, still partially powered despite the storm damage, acted as a conductor for the massive electrical discharge. Within moments, the flagship of the Zorathak conquest fleet went completely dark, its systems overloaded and fried by the natural electrical discharge. The term dead space had never been more literally applied. "We need to return to the ships immediately," Vexorius announced, rising abruptly and nearly upending the small dining table. "Our vessels require immediate attention." "In this weather?" Santos looked genuinely concerned. "No one should be out in this. The worst is still coming. The eye wall hits in about an hour." "We have no choice," Vexorius insisted, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Our mission parameters require—" "Young man," Grandma Beatrice interrupted, pointing her wooden spoon directly at his face. "Nobody leaves during a Category 5 hurricane. Sit down and finish your stew." The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Vexorius. Here he stood, Supreme Commander of the 47th Conquest Battalion, being scolded like a child by an elderly human wielding a kitchen utensil. Yet somehow, the simple authority in her voice made him hesitate. That moment of indecision proved costly. Another lightning strike, this one even closer, caused the small house to tremble. Through the window, They could see one of the Zorathak scout ships, literally lifted by a massive wave, and slammed back onto the dock with bone-crushing force. "Your submarines don't seem built for our coastal storms," Santos observed mildly. "Better to wait it out." Left with no practical alternative, Vexorius reluctantly resumed his seat. His grand conquest plans effectively neutralized by weather and an elderly woman with a wooden spoon. As the night progressed, the storm reached its terrifying peak. The small contingent of Zorathak officers huddled in Grandma Beatrice's living room, listening to the house creak and groan under the hurricane's assault. What amazed them most, however, was the humans' complete nonchalance about their predicament. Santos and several neighbors who had sought shelter together were playing cards at the kitchen table, occasionally glancing at the rattling windows before returning to their game. Grandma Beatrice had fallen asleep in her rocking chair, wooden spoon still clutched in her hand like a scepter. "I don't understand," Quibbleton whispered to Vexorius. "Their dwelling could be destroyed at any moment, yet they engage in recreational activities and sleep? Where is the emergency response protocol?" "This appears to be their emergency response protocol," Vexorius replied grimly. "They have normalized catastrophic weather events to the point of indifference." Around midnight, when the eye wall of Hurricane Lali finally reached Porto das Tempestades, the Zorathak officers received their most profound shock yet. The wind suddenly died down, the rain stopped, and an eerie calm descended. "Ah, we're in the eye now," Santos announced, setting down his cards. "We have about 40 minutes before the back wall hits. Anyone want to go outside and look at the stars?" "Go outside? Now." Grizzlethorpe's tentacles writhed in alarm. "But the atmospheric disturbance has merely entered a temporary lull phase." Santos shrugged. "Best time to check for damage and secure anything that's come loose. The second half of the hurricane is usually worse than the first." To the Zorathak commander's astonishment, Santos and his friends casually donned raincoats and headed outside, flashlights in hand. They moved around the village with practiced efficiency, helping neighbors board up damaged windows and retrieving items that had blown away. Vexorius followed them outside, driven by a commander's need to assess the situation. The sight that greeted him was sobering. 2 of the smaller Zorathak vessels were completely destroyed, their advanced alloys no match for the combination of saltwater corrosion and battering waves. The inevitable Triumph itself listed at an alarming angle, emergency lights flickering weakly across its hull. "Your spaceship movie props took quite a beating," Santos commented, coming to stand beside him. "Good thing they're just models, eh?" Vexorius stared at him, suddenly uncertain whether the human was being intentionally obtuse or genuinely didn't comprehend the reality of the situation. "These are not props," he said slowly. "We truly are from another world. We came to conquer Earth." Santos looked at him for a long moment, then burst into laughter. "You really stay in character, don't you? I admire the commitment to your art." Before Vexorius could respond, Grandma Beatrice appeared beside them, somehow having awakened and followed them outside without making a sound. She squinted up at the damaged flagship, then at Vexorius. "If you're really space aliens," she said, matter-of-factly, "you picked a foolish time and place for an invasion. Only an idiot starts a fight during hurricane season." The simple logic of her statement hit Vexorius with more force than the storm itself. For the first time in his illustrious career, he found himself speechless. The brief calm of the hurricane's eye soon gave way to the even more violent back wall. The Zorathak officers and their unexpected human hosts retreated back into Beatrice's home just as the wind reversed direction and slammed into the village with renewed fury. "This is the worst part," Santos explained over the howling gale. "The wind changes direction, so anything that survived the first half often gets destroyed in the second." As if to prove his point, a tremendous crash from the harbor announced the collapse of the inevitable Triumph's primary communication array. Through the rain-lashed windows, they could see the once proud flagship listing further, its hull integrity compromised in multiple locations. Vexorius stood on the small porch, his forearms extended in a futile attempt to shield himself from the driving rain, bellowing demands for human surrender that were immediately whipped away by the howling wind. Grandma Beatrice approached him, a bowl of fish stew cradled in her hands, regarding Vexorius with the same expression she had used on countless misbehaving grandchildren over the decades. "He's very tall, isn't he?" she remarked to no one in particular. "Wearing that sparkly armor, but bringing wet shoes into my house? Take them off first." With that pronouncement, she swatted Vexorius on the back with her wooden spoon. The sharp crack echoed strangely, the rain and wind momentarily pausing, as if the storm itself were holding its breath to see what would happen next. That simple wooden spoon, wielded by an elderly human, carried more authority in that moment than a million battleships, mixing astonishment with the salty scent of the sea. Vexorius froze, immobilized in his challenging posture. The Zorathak formation faltered, confused about how to respond to an elderly woman with a kitchen implement. The storm remained furious, each lightning strike hitting closer than the last. All the electrical weapons of the Zorathak gradually shattered under the influence of humidity, salinity, and atmospheric electrical charges. The humans stood in the rain, unconcerned about the swaying dock, still smiling and offering coffee cups, grumbling, "Want to play with fire? Let me brew you a stronger cup." When dawn finally broke over Porto das Tempestades, it revealed a scene of remarkable contrast. The fishing village itself showed minimal damage, clearly built to withstand far worse than Hurricane Lolly. The Zorathak fleet, however, lay in ruins. The inevitable triumph had partially sunk into the harbor, its advanced alloys corroded beyond recognition by the combination of salt water and electrical discharges. Smaller vessels were scattered across the beach, like discarded toys, their once imposing silhouettes now pathetic and broken. Inside Grandma Beatrice's kitchen, the Zorathak command crew sat in defeated silence. Their emergency communications had failed, their weapon systems were non-functional, and their strategic advantage had been completely neutralized by nothing more than weather and human hospitality. "I believe," Vexorius finally said, his voice hollow with the recognition of profound failure, "that we may have misinterpreted certain critical data regarding this planet. You think Quibbleton's neural patterns formed what could only be described as the biological equivalent of sarcasm. Sir, with all due respect, everything about this mission has been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. We ignored countless warning signs, dismissed critical xenobiological assessments, and rushed into a conquest without adequate preparation." Vice Admiral Klakina, who had remained diplomatically silent throughout much of the ordeal, finally spoke. "I recommend we immediately abort the conquest campaign and request a minimum 6-month delay to thoroughly review all Earth reports." Meanwhile, Santos and Beatrice were chatting cheerfully nearby, seemingly unconcerned about the alien invasion force having breakfast in their kitchen. "Have some more?" Beatrice offered, brandishing a pot of what she called devil's hammock fish stew, apparently the spiciest version in the region. Quibbleton leaned toward Vexorius, whispering urgently, "Sir, please explain to us. Eating spicy food, engaging in dangerous sports, living in hurricane zones. What exactly constitutes normal for these beings?" The question struck at the heart of Vexorius's growing existential crisis. He had spent his entire career believing in the superiority of the Zorathak Empire, their technology, their strategic thinking, their evolutionary adaptations. Yet, here they sat, utterly defeated by rain, salt, and an elderly woman with a wooden spoon. "I'm beginning to wonder," he said slowly, "if perhaps there exists a civilization I presume to be inferior, which in fact possesses its own unique logic." As the morning progressed, The full extent of the disaster became clearer. 3 Zorathak vessels were completely unsalvageable. The inevitable Triumph itself would require extensive repairs before it could even achieve basic spaceflight, let alone hyperspace capability. More concerning was the psychological impact on the crew. "They eat pepper seeds hotter than our acid weapons," Grizzlethorpe muttered, staring into a cup of coffee with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Do you dare drink more?" Across the village, life was already returning to normal. Fishermen were assessing their boats, children were helping to clear debris from the streets, and the community was working together with a practiced efficiency that spoke of long experience with natural disasters. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. The mighty Zorathak warships lay rusting in the salt water, while the primitive human village hummed with resilience and recovery. By midday, Vexorius had made his decision. "We will temporarily suspend all military operations," he announced to his officers. "Return to the ships and prepare a report. I recommend establishing diplomatic relations instead." The Zorathak Council looked bewildered. Relations? Diplomatic relations rather than occupation? But since when did we learn to invite each other for fish stew and exchange gifts? "Since now," Vexorius replied firmly. "We will propose a cultural exchange and survival program. A delegation of Zorathak will be invited to learn survival skills in storms, humidity, and the deadly cuisine of Earth." The draft agreement took shape quickly. Zorathak will bring robo-medical technology to help locals treat congenital diseases. In exchange, Earth will teach techniques for preparing diverse foods that almost kill you. As they drafted the report, the Zorathak officers murmured among themselves, "This mission may require more paperwork than firepower." Before departing, Captain Santos presented Vexorius with a bag of pure Brazilian coffee beans. "Drink this whenever you want to remember home without wanting to burn to death. Just take a sip." Vexorius's final report concluded with words that would shock the Imperial High Command. Subject: Deathworld Classification Update. Recommendation: elevate warning level from 15 to. This planet doesn't need conquering, but rather respect and study. Summary: it turns out, destruction is entirely useless against a species dedicated to drinking firewater, consuming dangerous foods, and inviting alien guests to dine before the dark storm. The inevitable Triumph departed the small dock, leaving Porto das Tempestades in the dawn after the storm, echoing with children's laughter and the scent of smoke from fish-cooking fires. In the months that followed, the Zorathak Empire underwent a significant paradigm shift. Vexorius's Class Deathworld report became mandatory teaching material. Never underestimate an enemy until you've seen them weather a hurricane, eat deadly spices, and laugh deliberately in the face of death. Vexorius himself became a keynote speaker at the Intergalactic Survival Conference, sharing lessons learned from the Borges humans. The Zorathak fleet continued operations, but always included a line item for Terran-style survival solutions in their annual budget. Earth, represented by Captain Santos, addressed the Celestial Peace Symposium, recommending inviting more civilizations to experience hurricanes, extreme spices, and dangerous sports, so they understand what it means to preserve life. Porto das Tempestades remained peaceful, with children learning to catch dangerous crabs under Grandma Beatrice's guidance. Before the story concludes, another alien spacecraft appears on the horizon, perhaps invited guests or new enemies. The final line suggests, "When you forget to read the notes from the universe, don't be surprised if life teaches you lessons right from the family dinner table." Vexorius stood on the observation deck of the newly repaired Inevitable Triumph, watching Earth recede into the distance. The blue-green planet that had so thoroughly humbled him now held a strange place in his consciousness, not as a conquest, but as a teacher. "Commander," Vice Admiral Klakina approached, her 12 eyes focused on different aspects of his posture simultaneously. The High Command has reviewed your recommendations. They've approved the cultural exchange and survival program. Good. Vexorius nodded, still watching the planet shrink to a distant point of light. Select the candidates carefully. Not everyone will survive the experience. You mean the hurricanes? Klakina asked. No, Vexorius replied, a slight shudder passing through his exoskeleton. I mean Grandma Beatrice's cooking. 6 months later, the first official Zorathak diplomatic delegation arrived in Porto das Tempestades. Unlike the invasion force that had preceded them, they came prepared, or so they thought. Their ships were specially designed with salt-resistant alloys. Their environmental suits were upgraded to withstand extreme weather conditions, and they had studied every available piece of data about Earth's dangerous environment. None of it prepared them for the welcome ceremony, where Captain Santos had organized a chili pepper eating contest, followed by a demonstration of base jumping from the nearby cliffs. This is how we build trust, Santos explained cheerfully to the horrified Zorathak diplomats. Shared danger creates stronger bonds than any treaty. Watching from the sidelines, Grandma Beatrice nodded approvingly, wooden spoon in hand. When a young Zorathak scientist hesitantly approached her and asked to learn the recipe for her fish stew, she broke into a wide smile. First lesson, she said, gesturing for the alien to follow her to the kitchen. Always respect the ingredients. The fish isn't just food. It's the ocean's gift. Treat it right, and it will keep you alive through any storm. As other civilizations received the updated reports about Earth's classification as a class Deathworld, reactions varied widely. Some empires immediately removed the planet from their conquest lists. Others sent their own observers, curious about the species that had repelled the mighty Zorathak with nothing more than weather and hospitality. Dr. Xenobiolus Primarch, the Empire's leading expert on interspecies adaptation, published a groundbreaking paper titled Environmental Extremophiles: How Humans Weaponized Hospitality and Hot Peppers. It became the most cited scientific work in 3 quadrants. Meanwhile, in Porto das Tempestades, life continued much as it always had. The villagers incorporated their alien visitors into the rhythm of their days, teaching them to fish, to cook, to dance in the rain, and to find joy in the simple act of survival. Your people build incredible machines, Santos observed to Vexorius during the commander's return visit. But ours build incredible communities. Perhaps together we can learn to build something even better. As another hurricane season approached, the Zorathak diplomats watched in fascination as the villagers prepared with cheerful efficiency. When Hurricane Marcos, the first major storm of the new season, made landfall, the aliens found themselves huddled once again in Grandma Beatrice's living room, playing cards while the wind howled outside. I still don't understand, one young diplomat confessed to Santos as they sheltered together. How can you be so calm when destruction surrounds you? Santos considered the question seriously. Perhaps it's because we've learned that some things cannot be controlled, only endured. The storm will pass, the sun will return, and we will rebuild whatever falls. That's not just our weather strategy, it's our life philosophy. On the anniversary of the failed invasion, Porto das Tempestades held a celebration. Tables laden with spicy food lined the harbor where the inevitable triumph had once rested. Humans and Zorathak mingled together, sharing stories and laughter beneath strings of colorful lights. Vexorius, now serving as the Empire's special ambassador to Earth, stood beside Grandma Beatrice, watching the festivities with a mixture of amazement and lingering disbelief. Did you know, he finally asked her, when we first arrived, did you know we were actually aliens come to conquer your world? Beatrice snorted, patting his arm with surprising affection. Of course I knew. I'm old, not stupid. Then why did you take us in? Why offer us shelter and food instead of resistance? She looked up at him, the wisdom of decades shining in her eyes. Young man, I've lived through 37 hurricane seasons, raised 5 children, and buried 2 husbands. I know a lost cause when I see one." "Our invasion was a lost cause?" Vexorius asked, somewhat offended despite himself. "No," she replied, brandishing her wooden spoon for emphasis. "You were lost and confused, thinking strength comes from weapons and not from here." She tapped her chest where a human heart would be. "No one conquers anything worth having. They can only be invited to share it." As the celebration continued around them, a child ran up to Beatrice, excitedly pulling at her hand. "Grandma! Grandma! There's another spaceship in the sky. Is it more friends coming to visit?" Vexorius looked up sharply, his commander's instincts immediately alert. Indeed, a new vessel hovered in the twilight sky, one he didn't recognize from any known empire. "Perhaps," he said carefully. "Or perhaps they too have yet to learn what we have learned." Beatrice squinted up at the newcomer, then shrugged philosophically. "Well, the fish stew is still hot, and I have plenty of wooden spoons. Invite them down. It's going to rain again soon anyway." As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance, heralding another approaching storm. But beneath the festive lights of Porto das Tempestades, no one seemed particularly concerned. Whatever came, be it hurricanes or alien visitors, they would face it together, with open doors, full plates, and the simple, unshakable strength of a community that had learned to dance with disaster. "When you forget to read the notes from the universe," Vexorius murmured, finally understanding the true wisdom of Earth. "Don't be surprised if life teaches you lessons right from the family dinner table."